Ken Jordan here. I'd like to talk to you about something that you probably have never experienced, that you probably wouldn't think is real even if you heard about it. It's real, and this is the topic, the subject of missing cities. Missing cities, missing towns, missing villages. The smaller the population, the more likely this is to actually work and have happen. I'm not talking to you about the lost colony of Roanoke or a ghost town. In Roanoke, what you had were people who suddenly vanished. They were there apparently. The next thing anyone knew, when they went to check on the small settlement, there was food left on the tables half eaten. Carved in a tree was a single word, Croatoan. I believe that's how you pronounce it. And nobody knew where they went. It's now believed that they were integrated into a local Native American tribe. Why this happened that way, we don't know. That seems very sudden, but this isn't the topic at hand. That was just people leaving or even people being kidnapped. I'm talking about you're driving along one day and you look up and you notice that the little town of Deerfield isn't on the roadside anymore. That the turnoff has turned into something else, and well, you don't necessarily think about it. Roads change, new plants are planted, things like that. Then later on, let's say you're thinking, I'm going to go and visit Aunt Mabel, who lives in Deerfield. But I need the instructions now that I can't just turn my old way. And you go to Google Maps, you look it up, and well, there's nothing there. Sometimes there's a white dot over it, so you can't see what's going on, at least on the satellite maps. But on the map itself, it just doesn't show Deerfield anymore. Well, if you're an old-fashioned person and you have the right map, you can go and you can look up the information. You have a physical copy of it, and well, there it is. There's Deerfield on your old map, but it's not on the new maps. You can't put it on your TomTom or GPS device to get there. So you look and you track out another route to get you into town, take the back way or something. And you drive over there wanting to see Aunt Mabel because you haven't talked to her for a while. And, well, sure enough, when you get there, the roads that used to be there just don't connect anymore. There's nothing there. And when you try the third way in, maybe there are only two, depending on how large the town is, you find that that's blocked off as well. So you drive home and you think, well, I know what I'll do. I'll get on my cell phone and I will call Aunt Mabel. Only when you try and connect with her phone number, the one that she's had for 30, 40 years, you just get a message saying that that number does not exist. Maybe it's been disconnected. You don't know. Well, you're probably by this point getting a little suspicious. What's going on here? For all intents and purposes, an entire small town is gone. Well, this would make a great fictional story, don't you think? But this happens. It does not happen often. I am not claiming that this is something that's going to happen to you. It certainly wouldn't work in a large town. Generally, if you have more than about 2,000 people, you are safe from this phenomenon. And this phenomenon is not, well, it's not in and of itself something that is mystical or of otherworldly origin. It's the government. It's people like me who for some reason decided that you needed to not go to Deerfield anymore. Probably not just because of the wonderful housing in the area either. Now, let's say, hypothetically, you decided, I'm not going to put up with this. I'm going to hike the 10, 15, 20 miles from the road into Deerfield. Most people aren't willing to do that. In fact, most people won't even walk a mile or two to check out something strange. They physically and mentally cannot get themselves to do it. When is the last time you saw something a little bit strange and decided, I'm going to hike through the woods or something along those lines in order to go and check this out? But let's say you're a sporty, outdoorsy type and you're willing to actually do this. Now, you can pack up a little pack, put some water in it, maybe a granola bar or two. Possibly, if you're smart, you realize you're going into A situation that's very anomalous, so you pack a firearm with you. Probably a handgun, depends on where you live. Maybe a shotgun, but probably a handgun. Hopefully you know how to use this accurately and are willing to in a real-world situation. Pack a tiny bit of extra ammo with you, just in case. Bring a camera along with you to document what's going on, and you start walking. And you go through the thick woods. Any trails that might have been there seem to have been overplanted, possibly destroyed. In some places you can still make out where there's a pathway that perhaps a deer or something like that has been using, and you follow these trails inward until you reach a fence. Now this fence will usually be 6 to 12 feet high, and at the top you're going to have simple strands of barbed wire, not concertina wire, not razor ribbon, just barbed wire that's facing outward, not inward, but facing outward. And there'll be a sign saying that this is a government facility. Trespassers will be prosecuted. You need to turn around and leave right then. Around this small town that you knew your Aunt Mabel lived in, Deerfield. Now, I'm not actually saying that it's called Deerfield. I'm just saying that it could be called Deerfield. And now it's gone. So, you are a sporty type. So you climb over the fence. You take your jacket off, you put it on the barbed wire so you don't get caught as you're climbing over it. You leverage yourself over, manage to climb down the other side, and even retrieve your jacket with only a few new holes popped in it. It's a good enough technique for getting over a fence like that. It's a little difficult, which is why they put it that way. And again, much like not hiking into a place, most people won't climb a fence that's going to be difficult. Matter of fact, most people won't climb a fence at all, especially one that's marked government property, no trespassing. But now you're inside it. There's still going to be a walk before you get to Deerfield. And when you get there, most of the time, you're going to find that everybody is gone. The houses are there, but there's nobody on the street. Maybe there's a stray cat living around, maybe somebody left a dog, but in the main, it's just eerily quiet. When you walk up to a door, perhaps the one to your Aunt Mabel's house, it's unlocked, so you go in. Looking around, you see, well, honestly, it just looks like your Aunt Mabel's house. The power has been turned off, but the doors and windows were closed, and otherwise, other than a small scent of dust and, whatever scents Aunt Mabel had in her house, Old Lady Violet's, lavender, whatever was being used, fading now over time, the place just seems like she could have been there, except for the power won't turn on. There probably won't be any water, and when you look around, half afraid you're going to find Aunt Mabel dead in her bed, you don't find anything. Now what you may find, depending on where you are, where Deerfield is and what happened there, you may find signs of a struggle. You may find that there's blood in certain places. You may even find something like remnants of gray hair that really matches what Aunt Mabel had on her head. But still, you walk around and you decide, well, I'll take a look at some of the other places. Maybe somebody else is still around or still hiding. Maybe Aunt Mabel just passed, totally forgetting that somebody hid an entire town. But you move from that house, the one you're familiar with from your visits, say when you were a kid, and you go to the next, where the neighbors live. Only the situation in there is just the same. Maybe the struggle was a little harder, the young strapping man that lived there putting up a better fight, but in the main, it's the same thing. No power, no water, possibly signs of a struggle. Then you move on, and you go from place to place. After 5, if you're really hardworking, maybe 10 different places, you start to notice a trend. Everything is empty. Now, about this time, what you're going to find is that several men in a Humvee pull up. They look quite aggressive and quite military, though you can't quite make out what the insignia says. It has a strange symbol on it, but there are no words. There's nothing saying U.S. Army, there's nothing saying National Guard. They're dressed like they could be from these groups in fatigues with polished boots and official-looking covers on their heads. Official-looking hats on their heads. And they're going to point weapons at you. Possibly a few sidearms, possibly a few rifles, and they're going to say, "Sir, this is a government facility. What are you doing here? What have you seen? Why have you come?" Now, being an honest soul like you are, one who pays their taxes on time, and while you have been trespassing, you were just looking for your Aunt Mabel, you simply tell them the story. "Well, gentlemen, I noticed that my aunt was missing, and so was this town of Deerfield with its 400 people in it, and when I tried to walk in because none of the roads seemed to work and I couldn't find the new map location to get in, I noticed this fence, so I came in. I've looked around and everybody's gone. What happened?" And then the man in charge, and it's almost always going to be a man, could be a woman, it doesn't really matter when somebody is looking at you down the barrel of a gun, will probably bark at you. "Sir, you don't have need to know that. You need to get out of this area now. We're going to escort you out of this area, and you will not return. If you mention this to anyone, you will be facing harsh penalties under the law. Do you understand that, sir?" And, of course, most people at that point are going to say, "Yes, I do understand that. I made a mistake, obviously. I've seen nothing, I've heard nothing. But, well, you know what you've seen, and you look around, and you realize, well, these guys may just kill me right now, but still." And you look at them and you say, "Well, my aunt is missing, so I do kind of have a need to know." That kind of trumps anything that you're saying, even if you are armed people. Sir, you will not speak of this to anyone. Do you understand?" Okay, yeah, I do understand that. I'm just going to take a step back. I'll just leave now. Well, then they handcuff you, toss you in the back of their vehicle, hopefully in a seat, but maybe not. You possibly take a small shot or two. They confiscate the firearm that you had in your pack, the ammunition with it. One of the guys steals your granola bar and your bottle of water, hopefully just to eat, but possibly because they think you might be collecting samples or something using the materials. And, of course, your camera, cell phone, everything is taken and destroyed in front of you. And then you're driven through a tunnel that you certainly would have never thought had been there, possibly blindfolded, and then suddenly you feel a prick on your neck. When you wake up, you're at home, and you can't remember what happened to you. You can't recall what went on. You're sore in places, and when you look later, your firearm is missing, your cell phone is gone, you don't know what happened, and you think you might have been mugged. It's the only thing that really makes sense. You remember something about Aunt Mabel, but she's probably fine. It's not like you were that close anyway. And you go along your day, and at least for a while, you don't think about the whole situation. Now, you might recall some plan to go and do something there. You might even recall the walk-in, but most of it's just empty, and you kind of make up a story that, well, it informs you that nothing happened. You obviously walked through the woods, and then it was so boring you came home and you didn't realize what was going on. Maybe you fell down, maybe you hit your head. There certainly is a sore spot on your head. Your neck aches. Maybe it's better if you just don't think about it anymore. If you just let it go. And most people will. Later, when you try and look up Deerfield, well, there's nothing on the computer anymore. And the old map you had that showed where it was, well, that's gone. And you just can't find it. And really, if you ask around a bit, nobody can find it. It's just gone. And all the people that were there are gone as well. Okay, now, I couldn't find an SCP to use for this instructive story, so I kind of made up my own right now. This is a real phenomenon. It is something that does actually happen in real life. I'm not going to claim this is a thing that happens often. I know of 4 small locations this has happened to, I believe. Certainly places where the roads have been changed and that kind of thing seems likely. I worked on some of these. I cannot say much about the specifics for reasons that I've explained before. I won't get into that, but my point here is that in some of these small locations, certain things took place that the government itself does not want you to know about. One type of thing that is probably the most common is that somebody behind the scenes was running a test of some kind, and horrible things happened. Believe it or not, your federal government does not allow the murder of people just to test things out. They don't go into small towns and introduce a new plague, for instance, just to see how it will spread and work. When they're going to do that, they introduce something that is very annoying and will require medical attention, but is non-lethal, or mainly non-lethal. And usually when they do this, it's in large cities. LA, New York. If you look at the number of colds and flus that people in those places have, they're vastly larger than in other similar locations. Compare Tokyo with all the radiation they've been getting from Fukushima to New York City or Los Angeles, and you'll find that people there get colds a tiny fraction of what people in these other locations get them. Now, part of this is that the Japanese people are highly cleanly compared to Americans. This is not always a positive trait. Americans are highly cleanly compared to a lot of other people in the world, and in fact, we're definitely in that upper 80% as far as keeping our bodies clean and trying to prevent diseases. But the Japanese go above and beyond that way, and that does make a difference as to how things spread. But you can still use that as an indicator to see how often things like that are tested in those large locations. So it's not usually something like that. No, normally they're testing something of psychological warfare value. They've introduced something that is potentially very, very dangerous. In one location, all they did was utilize certain light frequencies that they just drove through the town flashing at people, which turned everybody in the location into a super predator. They simply attacked. They attacked with cleverness, they attacked with intelligence, and they fought until they died. Now, very recently, this must have been 2 or 3 days ago, it was announced that this mechanism has been established in the scientific literature. In mice, and indeed in all mammals, you can turn on that kind of either a hunting response, where things will go after non-similar prey individuals. For instance, the mice would go after insects and things like that, and if you hit the other cluster of neurons in the amygdala, they will indeed go after other mice. And over 20 years ago, this was done to human beings, and it worked incredibly well, theoretically. So everybody in that town would have to have been removed, and I mean killed. Not just because they had this effect turned on, because indeed, you can turn this effect back off. You can flip a switch in a person's head that will turn them into an instant badass killer who will try their very hardest to murder anyone they meet. Loved ones, friends, family, it really doesn't matter. They're just going to fight. And if you have multiples of these people in close contact, they're going to fight each other until a certain portion of them are alive and the others are all dead. On a different note, sometimes anomalous things simply take place. What would happen if a small town were, literally plagued by beings that we don't have an explanation for. Well, thankfully, sometimes these people aren't actually killed, they're just relocated. They're given a story as to what might have happened that they can accept, and then they're given a new house in a different location, sometimes put in something very similar to a witness relocation program. And these places are watched from then on. Sometimes Aunt Mabel, as in the story there, doesn't actually disappear, she just gets a new house. She moves to the beach. Everybody moves away. And the town itself is just gone. Well, you don't have any reason to go there, because it's not like these places are destination resorts. So, you're pretty much just going to ignore it. And trust me, you're not finding this information on Google. And there's a reason for that. Well, this is probably a good subject for an entirely different audio selection for you, something to talk about later. But you've probably heard something along the lines of the internet has a long memory. The problem there is that, well, the internet has a long memory for you. It doesn't have that long of a memory for everything. And there are things that you can't find on the internet anymore. You can dig and dig, and it will not be there. I will actually give you a real-life example, because you might be able to dig far enough to find some link to this particular story. I am not commenting on the merits of the story. I am simply telling you that this actually existed. I confirmed that the information itself existed, and that now you largely cannot find this information anymore, even in fringe circles. The famous debunker, James Randi, many years ago, I think this is nearly 20 years ago now, was accused of pedophilia. My understanding of it is that he was actually innocent of any wrongdoing. However, this is very hard to tell. He's a very well-connected man behind the scenes. He easily could have had something like that covered up, but the ease of doing that does not mean that he is guilty of it. And my understanding from people that I've talked to is that that is not the way he swings. He's a homosexual, but he is not a pedophile. And just so everybody realizes this, he's come out as gay. A big portion of why he tried so desperately to disprove psychic phenomenon and telepathy was apparently to hide the fact that he was gay, because he was incredibly paranoid that people were going to read his mind and find out that he liked men. He was an older guy, so coming up in a world where that was a bigger issue than it is now, apparently it was enough to push him, along with other, no doubt, mental traits and some help from behind the scenes that I'm not even certain he knew about. He certainly got it, but I'm not at all certain that he knew who was helping him in his endeavors to disprove everything. Anyway, you can't find information about James Randi and pedophilia accusations now. For a long time, he worked with accused pedophiles who had a pedophilia-linked zine back in the day. This is how old this information is. A zine, if you're a younger person, was literally a tiny self-printed magazine. They normally had stories in them, things written by amateurs, people who wanted to break into writing. In this case, these are the people who later went on to form the Recovered Memory Syndrome Foundation. I've checked the name on that. But what you can't find is, actually you might be able to find this, is that James Randi was on the board of this pedophile-linked organization. The man and woman who came up with this false memory syndrome idea were, well, the father was accused of having sexually molested their own daughter, and then came up with this idea later as a form of defense, saying that it was the daughter's psychologist who forced this into being using hypnosis and things like that. Now, certainly, that can be done. And it probably does happen. I actually think that they're not totally wrong with their false memory syndrome idea, but that being said, there was some creepiness around things. They actually had put out a zine for a long time that had hardcore, pornographic level, child-involved stories. Now, this wasn't illegal because, even though you probably don't know about it, you can legally write stories about anything you want in America. We're good that way, even if what you're writing is reprehensible to most people. But James Randi was linked with that, and then later on, there was an indication that he had done something with two, I believe it was a 13 and a 14-year-old boy, but two boys. Now, this may or may not have actually been the case. I am siding with the idea from everything I've heard that it's not the case. My point here, honestly, is that you can't find this information anymore. It's vanished, showing that the memory of the internet is situational. Now, again, you might be able to dig this story out someplace. I've certainly talked about it over the years. Other people have talked about it. But you're going to be in the hinterlands of the internet. Short of going to the dark web, you're not finding this information. And don't go to the dark web, because that is a stupid thing to do on your home computer. I will get into that one later, but don't access Tor networks or anything on your own computer. Okay. Oh, sorry, I went off on a tangent there. We're talking about missing cities, and my point was that these cities are made to vanish, and the government can do this in fairly short order. They can do it with a person as well, certainly, and much more easily, but they can make entire locations and all references to them either change or simply not be there anymore. And the changes are the ones that are most diabolical. For instance, I gave the fictitious small town name of Deerfield. There are probably 1,000 Deerfields in the United States. One way of getting around this would be to simply change what state it was in. Deerfield, Oregon. Oh no, it was Deerfield, Washington. And that's it. It's in your article. 2 letters change, and you probably never even notice it. Do you go back and read things that you wrote 20 years ago? I know I sure don't. Not very often. Alright, this isn't something you need to fear, but I'm trying to expose part of how things are being hidden from you. In this, there were several different things pointed out. Hopefully you've paid enough attention to realize what's going on. Hopefully I didn't ruin things by not reading off the SCP information like I have been. I just could not find anything that linked to this topic, and I wanted to talk about it because it's recently come to my attention that there are possibly several new places that this is about to happen to in the United States. I don't know if it happens in other countries. I have some indication that it has happened at least several times in Canada. I do believe that it has happened in Great Britain. I don't know about any place else. I have to imagine they just misplace cities in Australia. Anything too near the outback is in danger of just not being noticed. It's a great place to disappear if you ever have to and you're willing to try and survive there. But this is a thing that has actually happened. This is not necessarily a thing that is anomalous, really. There are simple ways that this takes place, and a lot of it has to do with work on the computer and people planting trees and bushes where they weren't before. It can happen remarkably quickly. The road work in front of your house that takes 6 months to pave a single road, or the stuff down the street, has nothing on these work crews. They can go out in a single night and rework entire stretches of highway. They can take and make off-ramps just vanish. You'll be driving by on Monday, and by Friday, it's just not there anymore. And the thing with that is that most people are going to accept that that was the way that it always was. Now they may, if it's mentioned, say, oh, I think I do recall that having been there. Well, they just changed it somehow. It certainly won't seem like a big deal. It's always a big deal when things like that go on. I can't tell you to brave the brave the hump and go through the forest to find the secret location. I actually don't recommend that at all. But paying attention when things happen might be important right now. Now, as threats go to your personal life, this is almost non-existent. If you are one of the people who's going to be affected by this, you have other things to worry about. Simply living in a city will help protect you from this, even though cities are quite clearly about to become a really poor place to live for many, many reasons. Okay, I'm out now. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate your listening. Talk to you soon.